You have scrubbed it with deck cleaner. You have rented a pressure washer and blasted every board until your arms ached. You may have even paid for a fresh coat of stain last summer. The expensive kind the store promised would last for years. And yet here you are again, looking at the same gray, tired, splintery deck that makes the whole backyard look older than it really is. You walk out barefoot with your morning coffee and feel that rough, dry surface, and you already know a splinter is waiting somewhere. But long before anyone sold sealer in a plastic bucket, people kept outdoor wood sound and good looking for decades with almost nothing. No film-forming stain, no yearly stripping, no contractor. Just an understanding of why wood goes gray and two simple, cheap materials. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why your deck turned gray, why the stain keeps failing, and the forgotten way to bring the wood back to life. We are going to do this in two parts, and the order matters more than you'd think. First, we fix what is already wrong and get the real color of the wood back. Then, we make sure it stays that way. Because the second part, the part almost everyone skips, is what decides whether this lasts 1 season or 10 years. And here is the good news up front. It is also the cheapest part of the whole job. Let me start by naming what you are actually looking at, because it is not dirt, and that one fact changes everything. That silvery gray color is not grime sitting on top of the wood. It is the surface of the wood itself, broken down by the sun. Most people assume gray means dirty, so they scrub harder and wash more aggressively, and the deck still looks gray when it dries. The real cause is ultraviolet light. The sun slowly breaks down a substance in the wood called lignin. Lignin is the natural glue inside the wood that binds all the fibers together. It is what gives the wood surface its strength. When sunlight breaks that lignin down, the surface fibers lose their bond, they turn gray, and begin to lift away from the board. That is why an old deck feels dry, rough, and fuzzy under your hand, and why splinters show up where the wood used to be smooth. Run your palm across a weathered board, and you can feel those loose, raised fibers. That fuzz is lignin damage you can actually touch. So you are not looking at a dirty deck. You are looking at a thin, sun-damaged layer sitting on top of perfectly good wood. And that is the whole point of this method. If solid wood is still under there, you do not replace anything. You restore it. Before we go further, I put together a small book of these forgotten home and yard methods, the cheap repairs that actually last. It is linked below if you want it. And that is the only time I'll bring it up until the very end. Now, the modern response to a gray deck is almost always the same. Strip it, then brush on a thick film-forming stain or sealer. That coating sits on top of the wood like a thin layer of plastic, and for the first few months, it honestly looks great. But here is the part the label never explains. And it is the reason you keep ending up back where you started. Wood breathes. It swells when the air is damp, and it shrinks when it dries out, season after season, every single year. A hard film on the surface cannot move with the wood underneath, so eventually it cracks. And once it cracks, water finds the opening. Now that moisture is trapped between the coating and the wood, with nowhere to escape, and it pushes the film up from below. That is exactly why your stain peels, flakes, and blisters, and why every spring you scrape off last year's work before you can even start. Here is the part most quick tip videos leave out. The film did not fail because you bought the cheap brand. It failed because a surface film on outdoor wood fights the wood instead of working with it. Any film at any price eventually loses that fight. This is where the forgotten method goes in a completely different direction. It comes in two old, simple steps. The first step is a wood brightener, and the traditional one is oxalic acid, a mild acid woodworkers have used on weathered wood for generations. You mix the powder with warm water and brush it onto the damp deck and let it sit for just a few minutes. It does two jobs at once. It lifts that gray, oxidized surface layer, and it clears the dark black stains around old nails and railings. And here is a detail that surprises almost everyone. Those black marks are usually not mildew at all. They are iron stains, where metal hardware and the natural tannins in the wood reacted together. The oxalic acid grabs onto that iron and forms a compound it can release, and it lifts the stain right out of the wood. After about 30 minutes, you rinse it off, and the wood underneath comes back to a tone close to fresh-cut timber. The first time you do this on just half a board, the line between the gray side and the restored side looks almost unreal. You will want to stop and stare at it, because it does not look like cleaning. It looks like the years coming off the wood. The brightener also resets the wood's natural pH and opens the grain, and that matters enormously for the second step. Because now, instead of sealing a plastic film on top, we are going to feed the wood from the inside with a penetrating oil. A penetrating oil soaks down into that open grain rather than sitting on the surface, so there is no film to crack or peel. Think of the difference like this. A film finish is a raincoat laid over the wood. A penetrating oil is more like water soaking into a sponge. The oil cures inside the wood by slowly reacting with oxygen, leaving the fibers protected but still free to swell and shrink. And that is the entire trick. When the finish moves with the wood instead of fighting it, nothing lifts, so nothing peels. The two oils people have used for this for centuries are linseed oil, pressed from flax seeds, and tung oil, pressed from the nut of the tung tree. Tung oil is not some modern invention. By many accounts, it was used in China to waterproof wooden ships well over 2,000 years ago. The same flax that gives us linseed oil also gives us linen, the cloth. So this is a plant people have leaned on for a very long time. Linseed oil was for generations the standard finish farmers and woodworkers reached for. They used it to protect tools, fence rails, and outdoor wood. These were simply the everyday wood finishes of a world without a shelf full of plastic sealers, and that wood lasted for decades. There is a reason these oils survived for so long, and it is the same reason they still work on your deck today. Now let me be honest about what this method can and cannot do, because that matters more than any quick promise. If a board feels soft and spongy when you press it, or it crumbles at the edges, that is rot, and no brightener on earth will bring it back. Rotted wood has to be replaced. This method restores sun-damaged and weathered wood, not wood that has already failed. Check your boards first, especially near the ground, near the posts, and anywhere water sits, before you spend a single dollar on the rest. Oxalic acid is a mild acid, but it is still an acid. Wear gloves and eye protection, keep it off your plants, and rinse the area well afterward. And a penetrating oil is not a one-and-done treatment. It fades slowly over a couple of seasons, and then you simply top it up. That difference is the whole point. A film finish fails by peeling, which forces you to strip. An oil finish only fades, which means a light, easy recoat. Quick question while we are here. Tell me in the comments what you have been using on your deck and how long it actually lasted. Now let us talk about cost, because this is where the math stops being close. A box of oxalic acid wood brightener usually runs around $15 to $25, and it covers a lot of deck. A can of penetrating oil finish is roughly $25 to $40, and one round of it handles a typical deck section. So for well under $50 and a couple of afternoons, you restore the wood and protect it, with no contractor and no rented machine. Now compare that to the path you are probably on. A film stain you rebuy every year or two, plus the stripping, plus the lost weekend scraping. Or a contractor quote to strip and refinish, which easily runs into the hundreds, or a quote to tear out and rebuild, which runs far higher than that. One path is a small bag of powder and a can of oil. The other is a payment you keep making for as long as you own the deck. So here is exactly what to do and how to spread it out so it never turns into one giant exhausting chore. This weekend, pick the worst-looking section and just test it. Mix the brightener, brush it on a damp board, wait, and rinse. Watch the gray lift. That small test does two things. It proves the wood underneath is still good, and it shows you the color you'll get back. The following weekend, do the whole deck. Brighten it and rinse it thoroughly, then give it a day or two to dry out completely before you oil. Drying matters. Oil will not soak into wet wood, so be patient and let the boards come back to a dry, thirsty state first. Then, on a dry day, brush a thin coat of penetrating oil over the wood. Let it soak in and wipe off whatever the boards did not absorb. From then on, the routine is almost nothing. Once a year in spring, rinse the deck, let it dry, and brush on one light maintenance coat. No stripping, no sanding, no scraping, ever again. Because there is no film up there to fail, you are only topping up the oil that faded. And one more habit. Skip the pressure washer when you clean it. On soft, sun-damaged wood, it tears up the surface fibers and leaves the boards rougher than before. A stiff brush, plain water, and a little of that brightener will clean the wood without chewing the surface apart. The deeper lesson here is not really about decks at all. It is about working with the material instead of against it. A film tries to seal the problem away on the surface, and the wood fights it until the film loses. And oil works with how wood actually lives. Prevent instead of rescue. Maintain with a light touch instead of stripping and starting over. Feed the wood instead of coating it. Do this once, and your neighbors will assume you replaced the boards or finally hired someone when all you really did was stop fighting the wood. If this changed how you look at that gray deck out back, subscribe to The Forgotten Method, where every week we bring back a practical old method that still works today. Tell me in the comments which part of your home or yard has been giving you the most trouble, because it might just become the next video. And the full collection of these forgotten repairs is in the book linked below. That is the last time I will mention it, as promised. Next, on The Forgotten Method, we look at the old way to keep weeds out of a driveway for years without spraying a single thing. Sometimes the method we need most is simply the one we forgot.